Before streaming services made everything feel safe and polished, there were films that wanted to burn the rulebook and set the scraps on fire. Grindhouse cinema wasn't about pleasing anyone. It was about testing how far a screen could go before people stormed out or passed out. So here's the question. Which of these cinematic firecrackers could you actually survive watching? Buckle up, because what you're about to see isn't meant for the faint of heart. Cannibal Holocaust 1980. Few films have earned the level of notoriety that Cannibal Holocaust carries on its shoulders. Directed by Ruggero Deodato, this Italian shocker blurred the line between fiction and reality so convincingly that the director was arrested after its premiere, accused of making a real snuff film. He actually had to haul his actors into court to prove they were still alive. That's not a PR stunt, it's history. The setup sounds like a simple jungle adventure gone wrong. A group of documentary filmmakers heads into the Amazon rainforest to capture footage of isolated tribes. They don't return. What follows is a fictional, found footage film, pieced together from their reels, showing exactly what happened. The catch? The violence and cruelty were staged with such brutal realism that audiences couldn't tell where fiction ended and reality began. And then came the real controversy. Deodato included live animal killings on camera, sparking outrage and bans in dozens of countries. The mix of staged violence and real death was unlike anything cinema had shown before, and it pushed viewers to ask how far art should go to shock. Was this storytelling or exploitation at its lowest? Despite the bans and protests, Cannibal Holocaust became a touchstone for underground cinema. Its found footage style influenced films like The Blair Witch Project decades later. It's been called the most disturbing movie ever made, and honestly, that's not far off. It doesn't just show horror, it forces you to feel trapped inside it, clawing for a way out. Love it or hate it, Cannibal Holocaust redefined what too far looked like in cinema. Ilsa, she-wolf of the SS 1975. If there was ever a Grindhouse film that made people question their life choices as the credits rolled, it's Ilsa, she-wolf of the SS. Released in 1975, this Canadian-made shocker became infamous almost overnight for its combination of wartime imagery and relentless cruelty. Starring Diane Thorne as the commanding Ilsa, the film paints her as a camp leader with no limits to her sadistic experiments. The plot, if you can call it that, follows Ilsa's obsession with proving that women could endure more pain than men. She sets up gruesome trials to test her theory, subjecting prisoners to some of the most graphic scenes audiences had ever seen in the mid-70s. And while the movie pretends to have a scientific angle, let's be clear. This was designed to shock, disturb, and spark outrage. What really pushed this film into cult legend was the sheer audacity of its presentation. It didn't tiptoe around controversial imagery, it charged headfirst into it. That reckless approach got the movie banned in multiple countries, condemned by critics, and labeled one of the most offensive films ever created. And yet, it thrived in Grindhouse theaters, where audiences seeking the forbidden packed in night after night. Thorne's portrayal of Ilsa turned her into a bizarre kind of cult icon. Sequels and spin-offs followed, though none matched the original's impact. To this day, Ilsa, she-wolf of the SS, remains one of those titles whispered about in film circles as the definition of Grindhouse success. It's not just over the line, it obliterated the line and laughed while doing it. Whether you see it as art, trash, or both, it carved out a space in Grindhouse history that can't be ignored. Switchblade Sisters, 1975. Sometimes Grindhouse movies hit harder than the big-budget studio pictures of their day, and Switchblade Sisters is a perfect example. Directed by Jack Hill, this film follows a teenage girl gang called the Dagger Debs who fight, claw, and slice their way through a world stacked against them. Forget polished teen dramas, this was the raw, street-level saga Hollywood didn't want to touch. The story kicks off with Lace, the tough-as-nails leader of the Debs, running her crew with sharp tongues and sharper blades. When a new recruit, Maggie, joins the group, rivalries ignite, and the gang plunges into all-out turf warfare. It's got high school settings, roller skating rumbles, and enough switchblades to make West Side Story look like a polite picnic. What makes Switchblade Sisters special isn't just the violence or the campy dialogue, it's the way Jack Hill infused genuine social commentary into the chaos. These girls weren't caricatures. They were tough survivors navigating a city that dismissed them. The film tackles poverty, power, betrayal, and loyalty in a way that feels gritty yet oddly empowering. And while some of the action plays over the top, the underlying themes have aged surprisingly well. When it first came out, Switchblade Sisters didn't make much noise, but Quentin Tarantino later resurrected it under his Rolling Thunder Pictures label in the 1990s, cementing its cult reputation. The movie suddenly had a second life, and modern audiences realized it wasn't just cheap thrills. It was a scrappy, rebellious anthem for the overlooked and underestimated. Switchblade Sisters stands as one of Grindhouse's most stylish offerings. It's violent, outrageous, and sometimes ridiculous, but it pulses with a kind of raw energy that no glossy Hollywood remake could ever recapture. Coffee, 1973. If Grindhouse had royalty, Pam Grier would wear the crown, and Coffee is the movie that put it on her head. Released in 1973, Coffee is one of the ultimate blaxploitation films, and it cemented Grier as a cinematic powerhouse. The tagline said it all. They call her Coffee, and she'll cream you. Bold, brash, and unforgettable. The film follows Grier as a nurse-turned-vigilante who takes on drug dealers, pimps, and corrupt officials after her younger sister falls victim to addiction. Armed with both brains and a shotgun, Coffee carves her way through a rotten system with style and fury. And let's be honest, seeing Pam Grier stride into a den of criminals and take control is worth the ticket price alone. What separates Coffee from countless exploitation revenge stories is Grier's presence. She wasn't playing a sidekick or a love interest. She was the star, commanding every frame. At a time when Hollywood rarely gave women of color the lead, Grier didn't just take the spotlight. She burned it brighter. Director Jack Hill infused the movie with a sharp critique of systemic corruption and racial inequality, while still delivering the outrageous Grindhouse thrills audiences craved. Explosive action, outrageous one-liners, and over-the-top villains gave viewers plenty to cheer for, while Grier's performance gave them someone to believe in. Coffee wasn't just a hit in Grindhouse theaters, it became a cultural touchstone. Pam Grier showed that an action hero didn't have to look like Clint Eastwood or Charles Bronson. She was strong, smart, and fearless, and she reshaped what movie audiences thought a hero could be. Coffee remains essential Grindhouse viewing. Fierce, stylish, and unapologetically bold. It proved that exploitation cinema could entertain while throwing real punches at the system. I Spit on Your Grave, 1978. Few Grindhouse films inspire as much debate as I Spit on Your Grave. Directed by Mir Zarki, this 1978 release has been called everything from a vile exploitation piece to a raw, unflinching statement on survival and revenge. It's one of those movies that splits audiences straight down the middle, and maybe that was the point. The story follows Jennifer Hills, a writer who rents a secluded cabin to work on her book. When she's brutally attacked by locals, she doesn't crumble. She comes back with a vengeance. What follows is a series of revenge sequences so cold and calculated that they redefined what Grindhouse cinema could do with the vigilante narrative. When it first hit theaters, critics were merciless. Roger Ebert famously gave it one of the harshest reviews of his career, calling it worthless and degrading. But over time, some viewers argued that the film flipped the script on the standard revenge story by putting power squarely in the hands of its female lead. Unlike other films that sensationalized victimhood, I Spit on Your Grave focused on Jennifer's transformation into an avenger who systematically turns the tables on her attackers. The film's raw style only added to the controversy. Shot with minimal polish, long takes, and no glamorous touches, it felt less like a movie and more like a raw document of brutality and payback. That stripped-down aesthetic made it even harder for viewers to distance themselves. Love it or loathe it, I Spit on Your Grave carved out its place as one of Grindhouse's most infamous titles. It showed that exploitation cinema could spark cultural conversations, even if those conversations came with clenched fists and raised voices. And decades later, it's still sparking arguments about where the line should be drawn in film. Cannibal Ferox, 1981. Marketed with the tagline "Banned in 31 countries," Cannibal Ferox wore its controversy like a badge of honor. Directed by Umberto Lenzi, this Italian jungle shocker leaned hard into the gore-soaked reputation set by Cannibal Holocaust just a year earlier, and in some ways, it tried to go even further. The result? a film that was as infamous for its marketing as for what was actually on screen. The story follows a trio of young travelers who head into the Amazon rainforest to debunk myths about cannibal tribes. Instead, they stumble into a nightmare fueled by greed, violence, and revenge. Along the way, they meet drug dealers, double crosses, and of course, a tribe that delivers the kind of shocking punishment that guaranteed Ferox a spot in Grindhouse history. Lenzi packed the film with every exploitation trick in the book: graphic violence, lurid set pieces, and unrelenting tension. And just like its predecessor, the use of real animal killings sparked outrage and bans across the globe. But while Cannibal Holocaust had a disturbing realism that made people question its authenticity, Cannibal Ferox reveled in its grindhouse excess, leaning into over-the-top gore that was meant to shock rather than convince. Critics dismissed it as trash, yet audiences couldn't look away. It became a lightning rod in the video nasty era in the UK, where censors cracked down on extreme titles. That only boosted its notoriety. Today, it's seen less as a competitor to Holocaust and more as a symbol of how far grindhouse cinema was willing to go when it wanted to court controversy. Cannibal Ferox may not have the same lasting influence as its predecessor, but it embodies the grindhouse ethos perfectly. Push every button, cross every line, and dare audiences to keep watching. Thriller, A Cruel Picture, 1973. If there's a grindhouse movie that feels like a dare, it's Thriller, A Cruel Picture. Hailing from Sweden and directed by Bo Arne Vibenius, this revenge tale was notorious for being so extreme that it was censored heavily across Europe. In its uncut form, it combined cold brutality with art house visuals, creating a strange hybrid that shocked and fascinated in equal measure. The story follows Frigga, a young woman who is left mute after a childhood assault. Later, she is trapped in a cycle of abuse before deciding to turn the tables on her oppressors. She trains in martial arts, weaponry, and driving, transforming herself into a one-woman army. From there, the movie unleashes a string of carefully planned acts of vengeance, each one delivered with icy precision. What set Thriller apart was its mix of exploitation grit and cinematic flair. Vibenius slowed down action scenes to an almost dreamlike pace, using slow motion to emphasize every bullet, every blade, every ounce of pain. It wasn't polished Hollywood violence, it was stylized brutality, meant to leave viewers squirming in their seats. The film was so shocking that it earned the nickname, "They Call Her One Eye," referencing the eye patch Frigga wears after one of her captors mutilates her. That image alone became iconic, later inspiring characters in Quentin Tarantino's Kill Bill series. Thriller, A Cruel Picture, remains one of the coldest, most unrelenting revenge films ever put on screen. It doesn't soften the edges or offer comfort. It dares you to endure it. And if you do, you won't forget it. Miss 45, 1981. Set in the grimy streets of early 80s New York, Miss 45 is Abel Ferrara's masterstroke of grindhouse vengeance. At its center is Thana, a mute seamstress played with haunting intensity by Zoe Lund. After enduring 2 brutal attacks in a single day, Thana snaps, not in defeat, but in transformation. Armed with a .45 caliber pistol, she begins a vigilante spree against predatory men across the city. What makes Miss 45 unforgettable isn't just its premise, it's the way Ferrara shoots the city itself. The New York of this film is no postcard. It's a decaying maze of alleys, shadows, and neon grime, a perfect backdrop for Thana's descent into retribution. Each of her acts of vengeance is both cathartic and disturbing, raising questions about where empowerment ends and obsession begins. Zoe Lund delivers a performance that speaks volumes without a single word of dialogue. Her piercing eyes, her silent rage, and her gradual unraveling make Thana one of grindhouse cinema's most compelling anti-heroes. She's not invincible. She's not polished. She's raw, flawed, and terrifyingly human. The film builds to a finale that's equal parts shocking and iconic. At a Halloween party, dressed as a nun, Thana unleashes her fury in a blaze of violence that leaves audiences stunned. It's the kind of imagery grindhouse films thrived on. Bold, unforgettable, and packed with subtext. While dismissed by some critics on release, Ms. 45 has since been reevaluated as a grindhouse classic with real artistic weight. It's violent, yes, but it also forces viewers to wrestle with ideas of trauma, empowerment, and the cycle of vengeance. In short, it's more than just exploitation. It's a street-level masterpiece. Last House on the Left, 1972. Wes Craven's Last House on the Left is one of those movies that change the game, though not always for the reasons you'd expect. Released in 1972, it was Craven's directorial debut, and it dropped like a bomb on unsuspecting audiences. What started as a low-budget experiment quickly became one of the most controversial films of its era, shocking even hardened Grindhouse crowds. The story is simple, yet devastating. Two teenage girls head into the city for a concert, but are abducted by a group of criminals. After enduring cruelty, the girls' fates are sealed in brutal fashion. But here's the twist. The criminals unknowingly take shelter in one of the girls' homes, only to face the wrath of her parents. Suddenly, the victim's family turns from grief to cold-blooded vengeance. What makes Last House on the Left so notorious is its tone. Craven shot the violence with an almost documentary-like realism, stripping away the safe distance most horror films offer. The brutality is unflinching. But then the movie undercuts it with bizarre comic relief from bumbling cops, creating a tonal whiplash that left audiences unsettled. Was it intentional satire or just chaotic filmmaking? To this day, people debate it. Despite bans and outrage, Last House became a cult hit. It proved that horror and exploitation could go beyond scares. They could shake people to their core. Craven would later refine these ideas in The Hills Have Eyes and eventually mainstream them in A Nightmare on Elm Street. But his first outing remains one of the most raw and unfiltered Grindhouse statements ever filmed. It's messy, chaotic, and deeply disturbing, which is exactly why it's unforgettable. Pieces, 1982. Pieces, it's exactly what you think it is. That was the tagline, and it couldn't have been more accurate. This Spanish-American production is a quintessential Grindhouse splatterfest, and it proudly embraces every outrageous element the genre was known for. Released in 1982, Pieces quickly became infamous for its absurd plot, graphic kills, and shameless dedication to shock value. The film opens with a little boy building a jigsaw puzzle of a nude woman. When his mother discovers it, she scolds him, so he murders her with an axe. Decades later, a mysterious killer begins stalking a college campus, carving up young women, and assembling body parts like his childhood puzzle. It's grotesque, bizarre, and completely unashamed of its trashy roots. The gore is relentless, with chainsaws, decapitations, and buckets of bright red blood splattering across the screen. But what makes Pieces legendary is how it balances over-the-top violence with unintentional comedy. The dialogue is clunky, the dubbing awkward, and the pacing chaotic, but that only adds to its charm. It's one of those movies where you laugh, wince, and cheer all at once. Critics wrote it off as garbage, yet Grindhouse fans embraced it. Over the years, Pieces has become a staple at midnight screenings, often enjoyed with rowdy audiences shouting back at the screen. It's not refined, it's not clever, but it's pure Grindhouse excess delivered with a grin. If you want a movie that sums up the spirit of exploitation cinema, cheap, gory, outrageous, and impossible to forget, Pieces is a perfect puzzle piece in Grindhouse history. Caged Heat, 1974. No Grindhouse list is complete without a women in prison flick, and Caged Heat is one of the all-time essentials. Directed by Jonathan Demme, yes, the same man who later won an Oscar for The Silence of the Lambs, this 1974 entry took a well-worn exploitation formula and added surprising depth, even as it delivered all the expected sleaze and chaos. The setup is classic. A group of female inmates in a corrupt prison fight against the sadistic warden and guards who abuse their power. You get the brawls, the escapes, the steamy showers, and the riot scenes that made the subgenre famous. But what sets Caged Heat apart is Demme's touch. Even working under the Roger Corman exploitation machine, he injected personality, humor, and just enough satire to elevate the film above the pack. The Warden, played with chilling charisma by Barbara Steele, is one of the highlights. Steele, known for her gothic horror roles, gives the movie a strange elegance even as the script plunges into Grindhouse mayhem. And while the film checked every box for its audience, violence, rebellion, chaos, it also had flashes of real commentary on authority and freedom. Audiences in Grindhouse theaters loved it, and critics later looked back at Caged Heat with newfound respect once Demme's career skyrocketed. It became a reminder that many great directors got their start in exploitation, learning how to stretch budgets and captivate audiences with sheer energy. In short, Caged Heat isn't just another women in prison flick. It's the blueprint for how Grindhouse could be both wild and oddly clever at the same time. Blood Feast, 1963. It all started here. Herschel Gordon Lewis's Blood Feast is widely considered the very first splatter film, and without it, Grindhouse as we know it might not exist. Released in 1963, it cost just $24,000 to make, but its influence was priceless. Lewis took a bold gamble. Audiences had seen horror before, but they'd never seen this. The story centers on an Egyptian caterer who murders women and harvests their body parts for a ritual feast. It sounds absurd, and it is. But what made Blood Feast groundbreaking was the gore. Lewis didn't shy away from showing entrails, dismemberment, and his infamous tongue-ripping scene. It was all done with bright red paint-like blood and crude effects. But in the early 60s, it was like nothing audiences had ever experienced. Critics despised it, calling it trash cinema. Censors tried to shut it down. But horror fans flocked to it, curious to see what the fuss was about. And what they saw was a brand new subgenre being born right before their eyes: the splatter film. Suddenly, the idea of gore as the main attraction was on the table, and filmmakers everywhere took notice. Decades later, you can see Blood Feast fingerprints on everything from Friday the 13th to Saw. Lewis, dubbed the godfather of gore, proved that sometimes the cheapest, roughest films can have the longest-lasting impact. Is it campy? Absolutely. Is it gory? Without a doubt. But more than anything, Blood Feast is history, a true Grindhouse gem that pushed cinema to the edge and then shoved it right over. So there you have it, 13 Grindhouse gems that didn't just push cinema to the edge, they gleefully jumped off and dragged audiences with them. These films broke rules, tested nerves, and left a legacy that still bleeds into modern movies. Which of these wild rides have you braved? And which ones would you never dare to watch? Drop your thoughts below, hit that subscribe button, and remember, cinema's darkest corners are always worth exploring.